Evening, everybody, and welcome to the Bible study. I'm looking forward to this one. We're going to be looking at Proverbs 31, which has to be one of the best chapters in the Bible. I absolutely love it.
Evening, everybody.
And I've got an excellent panel to talk about it with me. Here they are. First up, Poe. Welcome back.
Hello, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, every time. Christine, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. And Faith, welcome to Lambda Bible Studies.
Thank you. Good evening.
Great. So, not to give spoilers, but Proverbs 31 is a chapter about, well, at least the sort of second half of it is a description of like the ideal biblical woman. So I think it's a timely topic, and also I've got an unusual panel for me. It's all women this evening, which was slightly by design because I think it'd be interesting to hear your perspectives. But I'm also going to be giving my perspective, and I'm not a woman, so I don't really, I don't apologize for that. I've got thoughts.
I think you probably met some women.
One or two in my time. Okay, let's share the screen. So here we are. So this is actually the last chapter of Proverbs. The words of King Lemuel, an oracle that his mother taught him. Before we go any further, side note that apparently scholars have speculated that Lemuel is actually Solomon, and might even be like a pet name. Like his mother called him Lemuel, so it's his words, but coming via his mother, who therefore would be Bathsheba.
That doesn't mean anything to me. Sorry, I'm a newbie.
Sorry, program note there, but yeah, it doesn't really matter. So
okay.
Let me step back and give more context. So the book of Proverbs is a fantastic book, 31 chapters of pure gold. Most of the chapters are like, well, should we go and see that? Like, pick a random number. It's 24, right? Be not envious of evil men, nor desire to be with them, for their hearts devise violence, and their lips talk of trouble. By wisdom a house is built. So it's just lots and lots of individual proverbs, but the beginning and the end is slightly more of a discourse, and it's just loads of wisdom. And it's mostly thought to be written by a king called Solomon, who prayed for wisdom and was given it by God. So yes, the speculation that this is King Lemuel is really just to say it's written by the same guy as the rest of Proverbs is.
And Proverbs, just to get really down to basics, I always heard Proverbs described as the book in the Bible, but then also some of the stories that Jesus told were also called Proverbs. You know, when he told
parables.
Parables. Yeah, you're right. I got this confused. But proverb is like verb. It means to do something, and pro means like good. So I'm guessing it means like good things to do.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the word proverb in English still exists, right? It has a similar meaning. LaRue is coming straight in with, I thought women were supposed to be silent in the church. Well, LaRue, as I always say, this is not a church. so settle down in the pews there.
How are you going to meet a wife if you don't talk to women at church?
Just purely on visual appearance. No, I'm kidding. Okay, shall we read some more verses?
Go on.
And then discuss. Right. What are you doing, my son? What are you doing, son of my womb? What are you doing, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to take strong drink, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed, and pervert the rights of all afflicted. Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty, and remember their misery no more. Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. So this is words from the mother of King Lemuel, and I think quite wise words. This isn't the main focus of what I was hoping to look at today, but does anybody have any quick thoughts about this passage, or should we just jump straight into the meat of it?
Well, I do wonder why it was prefaced with, this is something my mother said. When if it's true and if you believe it, then I would think that maybe just stating it would be sufficient. But it seems like it has a meaning in itself in the context of this is something that my mother told me. I don't know. Yeah,
that's interesting. There's quite a lot of stuff in the Bible which I'd describe as sort of interesting contextual information, and I don't know that it always has significance, but in this case, I think the fact that he's learning from his mother, I think, is significant. Like, as in, as a society, do we underestimate the significance of the mother's tutelage of her children? Perhaps. I mean, she's concerned about him specifically as a king, but I'd argue if a society has mothers who are unwise, then the next generation is in big trouble.
It might also just underline verse 26 that comes later. Because that says that a woman speaks with wisdom. So this might be the wisdom he's talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Now, I wonder if we'll have future discussions about the subject of other verses in the Bible that talk about women teaching. But here's one that clearly, in some context, in some form, a woman being able to teach and have wisdom is a very significant and important thing. So I don't want to spend the whole stream preempting other Bible chapters that we're not even looking at, though. There's plenty here on its own merits. Do we think this is wise advice in general? Like, if you're going to become a king, is your top priority about not drinking wine?
I don't really understand the connection between the drinking wine verse and giving strength to women. Is that like if you drink wine, then you'll let women have power over you? I don't think I really get it.
I don't know that directly connected, are they? Are these not separate? Maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, they're different verses, but I don't know.
I would read it as, do not give your strength to women, your ways to those who destroy kings. And then as a second thing, it's not for kings to drink wine or for rulers to take strong drink. And then there's an explanation of it, lest they forget what's been decreed.
I mean, that
give strong drink to the one who's perishing. This is drink as a what do you call it when it's a painkiller, as anesthetic, which is interesting. That like it's actually recommending if you're in distress to drink a bunch of wine.
And that's all it's really good for.
Yeah. There's another proverb which says something like, do not drink wine when it is red like rubies and sparkles in the cup, leading some people to speculate that the Jews at this time drank their wine watered down, like they took a little bit of wine and filled the rest up like it was fruit juice. No, like it was squash. But when I suggested this to some of my wine aficionado friends, they were pretty horrified at that suggestion. So I don't know.
I thought maybe they only drank white wine.
Oh, white wine. Yeah, maybe. All right. Let's get on to the woman who fears the Lord. An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. Should we take this little chunk at a time? So how do we feel about this suggestion that an excellent wife is rare? Or
seems like that's true in every whenever you say it, any time of history, it feels like an excellent wife is always hard to find.
Oh, Flopocrat's saying actually watered down wine was a common drink in the Roman army, but not as a luxury. Okay, so maybe there is some plausibility to the idea. Yeah, so is this do you think women should take offense at verses like this? Christine, what do you reckon?
Well, it puts a lot of pressure on me.
Okay. You mean this verse puts pressure on you, or me asking you this question puts pressure on you?
This verse, I think this proverb in general, when I read it, I have difficulty not being envious of this perfect woman, because I don't see myself ever being this great.
She is pretty epic. I mean, we've only read a couple of verses, but as we go through, like, she's like a superwoman, isn't she? Do you think it's possible to attain this level of epicness in a real human's lifetime, or is this like a vision of perfection that's beyond? Like, do you think anybody in history has actually looked through this and not felt a bit of intimidation? I'd imagine anybody reading this is going to struggle to. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, easy. We'll see as we go through. But yeah, interesting observation.
It reminds me of that verse. You'll have to tell me which verse it is. Was it Ecclesiastes with I've met a
yes.
1,000 men. You can find one good one, but a single woman. But I think men pat themselves on the back for that observation, when really they're almost as condemned as the women are by that.
True. Yes, it's kind of a massive diss to men, followed by a even slightly worse diss for the men, for the women. Where is
there's a similar diss in in Pride and Prejudice. We're going really off topic now, but Mr. Darcy is commenting on what he believes would be a truly accomplished woman. He's complaining that he seems like every woman he meets is described as accomplished, when really he's only ever met about half a dozen in his whole life. And Elizabeth takes offense to that. And then she asks, oh, what can you think as a really accomplished woman then? And then when he describes it, she says, I should scarcely think you found even one with high standards like that.
I actually watched Pride and Prejudice the other day, the Keira Knightley version. Not to destroy any claims I have of masculinity, but I did. Here it is. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another to find a scheme of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among 1,000 I found, but a woman among all these I have not found. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. That's not the clearest translation, is it? I feel like other translations do some assistance. Should we slum it down to the NIV? See how it translates it. I found one upright man among 1,000, but not one upright woman among them all. Yeah. Okay. Should we discuss this, or is that too much of a tangent?
I think we're not going to get through much if we
if we do every single tangent. But yes, interesting verse to compare. And I think you're right. It's basically a diss on both sexes. But it's got that classic. There's a few other bits in Proverbs as well where it's like 6 things the Lord detests, 7 he finds abominable. It's the kind of one-upmanship. The second verse one-ups the previous one. Like, men are awful, women are truly awful is kind of the feel of it, isn't it? All right. Any other thoughts about these 2 verses? It's interesting, I think, that trust is the first thing that gets brought up. Someone who's trustworthy. And the reason a husband would look for this is because he will have no lack of gain. Fascinating. Oh, by the way, what do we think about the fact that this is all framed as how a wife should appeal to a potential husband?
Instead of just as a woman, as on her own.
As an independent sort of Beyonce-like figure striding through the landscape.
Yeah, noteworthy. It's for men, it would be weird to phrase it that way. To say, to say what a great man would be, and then to describe a great husband or a great father. But for women, it becomes much more naturally. So a woman is either a good wife or she's potentially a good wife.
Interesting. J N77 says, insufficient sample size, to be honest. All right. Let's carry on. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works with willing hands. She is like the ships of the merchant. She brings her food from afar. She rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and portions for her maiden. Does anything about this strike you as surprising, given how old the text is and the way it's portraying women?
Yeah, she's not a jewel to be admired, but she's there to do work and to go out, which I think some people might be surprised by, but I guess knowing historical context, it's it's only ever been the very high class women who've afforded that sort of level of being kept and having parties all the time, where most women have always had to seek wool and flax.
Yeah, that's right. I think what you're basically saying is this would be surprising to people who are not that historically informed.
Well, I wouldn't mean to diss anyone who was under that impression, but
no,
more or less.
No, most people are historically informed, and largely I'm usually historically uninformed. But yeah, does this? I guess I'm wondering, does this seem appealing? Is this a vision of womanhood that's kind of? Does it appeal? I've heard some people think Proverbs 31 is absolutely glorious vision that puts women up on a pedestal, and other people say the opposite. They're like, no, this is a man's perspective on womanhood that's just putting them in a box. And which way do we feel about it so far?
Well, she probably isn't a poor woman because she has maidens, so that calms me down a little bit about the text. And I kind of see it as a calling, like something to grow into. Nobody's probably going to get there, but it's something to strive towards.
Given that a lot of the first 30 chapters is, well, there's plenty of the Proverbs which is gender neutral, but of the gendered stuff in the first 30 chapters, a lot of it is advice to young men and seems quite hard to follow. To then have at the end here, quite difficult to follow, but again, I think a glorious vision of a potential life to strive for. I think it's great, but yeah, certainly challenging.
I think if it was easy, then people would just naturally do it. So there's no need to be taught to do stuff that's easy and nice.
Yeah. Okay, let's carry on. So, where did I get to? Here, didn't I? She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. Isn't that interesting? the strength, not just a sort of moral strength, but literally strong arms. I find a lot of this really interesting and slightly surprising as a, you know, I guess what you were looking for in a nice Jewish woman was like hench strong man. What would AA say about this? You'd be tutting.
I think you've got to have enough strength and enough endurance to get through everything that needs to be done. Yeah. So that depends on the lifestyle, but in general, being stronger is never going to be a hindrance to you, unless you've got like absolutely stacked guns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think just to jump on the current discussion that AA did start about the, what was it? The tomboy abs.
Muscular women, should we say.
Yeah. A lot of what's considered to be achievable these days is actually the result of people taking various, anabolic steroids or, performance enhancing drugs and things. It is unlikely that a woman who does a lot of physical labor and activity will end up looking masculine. I think it's actually like a woman with strong arms, her arms don't look like men's arms. Do you know what I mean? There's a natural athletic female frame which is feminine.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to look like a supermodel, but in the long run, I think it's probably better to have a wife who's strong than a wife who's too dainty and useless.
I've heard speculation that the appeal of supermodels is actually to other women.
Yeah.
So again, it's interesting to frame it as what do men look for, and you have strong arms.
Well, again, if it was you need to find yourself a wife who's really beautiful, then you didn't need to be told that, because that's obvious. No. So this is kind of telling you like, I don't know what men find attractive in terms of strength of arms, but I'm guessing that they might go like, well, maybe you don't think of much of her muscles, but think about how strong she's going to be carrying that baby.
I think there must be a deliberate subversion of expectations here, right? She dresses herself, and as you read it, you're expecting like jewels or beautiful embroidered fabrics or whatever, and then with strength. I think it's a deliberately surprising verse.
I was expecting it to say something like modesty, you'd find in a lot of religious teachings that this is a prized virtue of women, is to know how to be modest, which is open to a lot of interpretation.
Yeah, so where did I hear that recently? Somebody suggesting it was probably Turnip on the. Did you catch that stream they did the other day? But yes, 1 Timothy, I think, has. We'll probably not get into this really today, but I think it's here. Sorry, my internet's slow. It's loading, but incredibly slowly.
Well, your voice is coming through clearly. I don't know how good.
Okay, here we go. Oh, sorry. I need a chapter. Probably why it was struggling. Yeah. So. Oh yeah, here we go. Women should adorn themselves with respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair and gold and pearls and costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness, with good works. So I guess a slightly different take on, but the same subversion of like, what should you dress in? Good works in this case.
I never knew that the Bible condemned braided hair.
But that's interesting. Do you think, therefore, these things are literally always forever forbidden, or is it more of an attitude, maybe more of a prefer good deeds over, if you're going to chase after something, consider your good deeds to be your pearls. But I do have a strict rule on this channel. Like, if any of you were wearing pearls, you'd been kicked straight off.
Yeah, I mean the idea, well, I don't know where exactly it comes from, if it's biblical or not, but the idea that we should dress nicely for church and for special occasions like weddings, that doesn't seem extremely hedonistic to distinguish certain occasions by the way we dress.
Yes. Yeah. I think you can push these things too far. I mean, many of the Proverbs should be considered patterns rather than eternal, simple commands to just follow like a robot, especially because sometimes you'll find two Proverbs which literally contradict each other. So there has to be some level of interpretation. All right. We skipped over 16. Christine, have you ever considered a field?
Well, I actually have a field outside my house, but
did you buy it?
Did you plant a vineyard?
No. But I do wonder about this. So, is she buying this with her husband's money, or how do the economics here work?
Well, I guess it's unlikely at this time that the woman would have had much capacity to generate income, right? So I guess so, but it isn't described as such.
This translation I'm reading says out of her earnings explicitly.
Well, I guess you've corrected me.
Well, I don't know what yours.
No, I think you're right. I mean, after all, what was she doing earlier? She was working wool and flax, and if we know anything about economics, she's mixing her labor with the raw materials. So yeah, maybe it is her own income. But I guess the reason I initially said she wouldn't have much ability to generate income is because my understanding is if you were a widow or just unmarried, that was a precarious situation to find yourself in. But it is interesting that here she is buying it. How many times have we been told women were unable to purchase property until they were kind of released by the British in the 20s or whenever it was. So
yeah, women apparently it was illegal to get a married woman to get a loan without her husband's permission until like 1980 or something. So getting a loan is often an important part of getting owning property. So if you buy, I think women have had the right to own land and to buy it, but it's pretty prohibitive when you're not allowed to borrow any of the money that is required for it.
I just worry about going back in time. You look at what the laws were 50 years ago and find some restrictions on a particular demographic, and then simply extrapolating backwards through time and assuming that it's been a trajectory of increasing freedom.
I think it might have been bumpy.
I think it may have gone up and down. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's sensible. It's a sensible assumption.
And again, she's planting the vineyard. This is a very physical, hands-on kind of role that she's taking. Like
to get very economic and historical about it, I think the vision of the woman who doesn't work is like I said, it's for the upper classes, but it's also quite recent in the sense that I think for a man to be able to support a wife who doesn't work, he must be very wealthy indeed. And it's kind of a symbol of his success, which is why this is held up as the optimal situation, because it looks good for the man. But it's probably not been very common in most of history. And it's probably not, it's not really there to advantage the woman necessarily, that she should have an easy life. I don't know, but one thing to think about.
That's interesting. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. Faith, what do you think? What's the significance here of her lamp not going out at night?
probably easy if you don't have to make a fire the next morning.
Yeah.
Or maybe she stays busy the whole night, but I don't think so.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was wondering the same thing.
She literally never sleeps.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
She sleeps during the day.
Okay.
No,
might be better in these climates.
Yeah, I had a couple of ideas for what this might mean. One, yeah, like you say, could be kind of an exaggeration, but yeah, she's busy late into the night. She's busying away, and the kind of amp it up to 100 is she literally doesn't sleep. The other thought I had was, I get the impression with ancient fire that it was much it was much harder to light a fire than it is today. So actually it's kind of a sign of prudence and planning and having your life together to be able to keep just like if your fire goes out, either you're going to be rolling up your sleeves and doing the whole survival kit business with twizzling a stick around, or you'll probably go to your neighbor and say, can I look, I'm sorry, very embarrassing, but our fire went out. Can I borrow some fire and bring it around and light my kindling? So I think it's either a sign of her hard work or her kind of diligence in having a life together.
That's
conscientious.
I never thought about.
That's a good word.
I never thought about the logistics of having to always have a fire so that you can.
Yeah, because they didn't have like a little Zippo lighter or whatever.
Well,
I think armies used to march with fire. You'd have part of the resources you'd carry with you on a long campaign would be a fire that is literally kept alight all the time, day and night.
Cool.
And yes, AM points to the parable of the virgins in the New Testament. That's a great reference. Should we quickly dash off there and see that? How long have we got? Yes, let's do it.
The virgins who carry flames, or is that?
There's a parable that seems almost perfect for doing this. So should we go off and do this? We're using up all of our fun women in the Bible verses all in one go, but I think they kind of talk to one another. Is it Matthew 25? Look. Sorry, I sometimes tell my guests which chapter we're going to be looking at so that they can prepare, and then we end up doing like 20 other verses. So I can only apologize.
I remember Jordan Peterson saying that the Bible is hyperlinked.
Yeah. We learned.
Danny, that's not literally true.
It's not literally true, but if you look in some Bibles, they'll have. Yeah, so there's a few notes here that, like footnotes, reference other bits that are related. But if you literally referenced every time two verses talked to each other, every verse would probably have about 10 links. Maybe that would be a fun project for someone to do.
Yeah, I mean, like actually inserting a hyperlink, like in Wikipedia, where you've got each word is highlighted and you can go to a different verse.
Yeah, and not to do a tangent on a tangent on a tangent, but we were recently talking about the Strong's numbering. So there's for each individual Hebrew word has a number, and you can go and look up where that Hebrew word appears in other verses. Anyway, let's quickly read this and then see what we learn. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, "Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise answered, saying, "Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourself." And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterwards, the other virgins came also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you." Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. So turns out the most useful interpreter of the Old Testament is Jesus. Can anybody explain what's going on in this parable? Does this make any sense?
Did all those virgins marry him, or were they just there for the wedding feast?
I think they were. Oh, that's a good question. But I think they were there for the wedding feast because, yeah, I think the polygamy that goes on in the Old Testament wouldn't actually be endorsed by Jesus, because the New Testament teaching is very clearly one wife. So that would be. I don't think it's necessary to. I don't think it probably changes the interpretation one way or another. But good question. So assuming that it's just about whether, because virgin, I think the significance of that word is probably just that it's a young woman. Like, as I understand it, the word is the same for young woman and virgin. So
like maiden, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Maiden is a good translation. So okay, you've got this story. There's all these young women, these virgins, and they're waiting because they don't know when the bridegroom's going to turn up. They've got some ridiculous wedding custom where it's like, we're going to have the wedding, but it's going to be in the middle of the night. I'm not going to tell you when. Yeah. I guess the obvious thing, so that we understand this passage in its proper context, what's Jesus actually saying? Like, what's he really talking about with the arrival of the bridegroom, and then people saying, Lord, Lord, open to us, and him saying, I do not know you?
That's the judgment day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so his direct message for people following is kind of, don't do the AA tactic, don't try going for a deathbed conversion, because you don't know the day or the hour. Be ready at all times, and that's elaborated in other parts of the New Testament. Okay, so, but having established what this passage is talking about, what's the significance of the lamps not going out here, and what's the implication for the people who managed to have their lights burning all the way through the night? Christine?
Well, I think, doesn't it just indicate that they are prepared?
Yeah, they brought the oil, right? And aren't they somewhere literally called wise? Yeah, 5 of them were foolish and 5 of them were wise. So it's not a million miles away from what we were reading in Proverbs. The wisdom here is in the preparedness. Yeah, like you say. Cool. All right. Thanks for pointing us to that. Who was it? Lucy in chat. Was it AM? Even
outside of a religious context, I think there's a kind of just sensibleness. There's a wisdom in being prepared for, more than to be a kind of pessimist when you're making your plans. Bringing more oil than you think you need, filling up your petrol tank when it's not quite empty yet. That's sort of just pragmatic approach to preparing for things.
So it sounds like you think you're already fulfilling this qualification, Poe.
Oh no! I mean, the reason I think about the petrol tank is because if you fill up when you're at Tesco, you can get cheap petrol. But then if you wait and then you have to go in the middle of just wherever, it's incredibly stressful, and then you end up paying more for petrol. If you said like on the motorway or whatever, you're on a long trip, really should just filled up. That's happened to me a number of times where I've had to pay extra for filling up in the middle of nowhere rather than just filling up before I left.
Yeah. Have you ever heard the rule, 2 is 1 and 1 is none?
Yeah, that's our rule of unpopular opinions hosts.
That's it. Yeah. So the idea being that if you, I forgot about that. If you've got 2 of something and it runs out, you've got the other one there for you while you dash off and replace it. So you never actually run out.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, that's my father's rule about desserts.
Ah.
Yep.
Very good. I've lost my place. Her lamp does not go out at night. Okay, here we go. She puts her hands to the distaff and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hand to the needy. Any thoughts about these verses? I actually don't know what a distaff is, so I'm going to Google that.
I would have thought the needy would be a synonym for the poor. So I don't know what it seems like it says the same thing twice.
Yeah, I think this is an example of Hebrew parallelism. It happens all the time in Hebrew that you'll say the same thing twice and you'll just use synonyms. So yes, you're right. It is. She opens her hands to the poor and reaches out her hand to the needy. But often the second has kind of elaboration. So in the one case, she opens her hands, and then in the next time, she's reaching out her hands. So,
I mean, I guess
she's allowing people to take from her. In fact, she's
offering
asking them to. She's going to them and saying, "Look, to have what you need."
Yeah.
But what else does this verse show about because we've kind of seen prudence and hard work so far, I'd say. But I think there's something else coming in now about her character.
I don't know what a distaff is. I'm looking it up.
Yeah, I just looked it up too. A stick or spindle on which wool or flax is wound for spinning. So a spindle.
So she's working. This is more about her working.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just on the most basic reading, she's generous, right?
Yeah. So I think a moral claim of kindness and care, over and above, because so far we've had kind of potentially go-getting businesswoman, but now we've got somebody who has heart as well. I think also worth mentioning that being able to sew would have been a much more necessary skill, right? Before you could purchase fast fashion items, before you can go and get cheap clothing, cheap whatever, to be able to repair things was actually absolutely vital. And to not be able to do this presumably would mean you're encumbering somebody else to do it on your behalf, or you're not very well presented, which I guess means I think there is a sense in which so yes, dress yourself with strength and dress yourself with good deeds, but also, don't be a complete shambolic mess. Is that fair? Is that a walking down the middle that we can agree to?
Yeah, there's no need to have holes in your clothes if you can fix them, I guess.
Dagbreaker has come up with a new interpretation. She's handing out samples of produce from her land. Great advertising. Maybe these poor people will be, future millionaires, and then they'll come back and be, loyal customers.
The last will be first.
Yeah. All right. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet. What? What's going on here? What's the connection? Does red cloth repel snow?
It gives the impression of warmth.
Yeah, that's all you need.
They will look at each other and think how warm they look. No, I don't know what that means.
I think there's a footnote there that it could potentially mean something else.
Oh, yeah. Or in double thickness. Okay.
That seems more sensible.
If that's the correct reading, it's a shame they didn't put that in the main text.
I don't know.
Which makes me think that whoever did this translation must have thought scarlet was the more likely option. But yeah, okay. If it's that they've got twice as much on, then that makes sense. I was wondering if scarlet was an expensive dye.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you. Yeah.
Same as purple that comes up later.
Oh, yes, the next verse. She makes coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Yeah, okay, so then 3 times we've got fine linen, we've got purple dye, we've got scarlet. So actually, signs of affluence. This is like a rapper with the big gold chains of the time.
I guess purple. I mean, it seems like it would be unwise if you're really penny pinching to splash out on dyes, but I guess the idea is that if you're working hard, you won't have to be pinching pennies.
Yeah.
And if you have a little bit of disposable income to spend on dye, then when it does come to buying a new pair of shoes for winter, you're not going to be wanting for money.
Yeah, there's a verse, isn't there, elsewhere in Proverbs that says, the man who fears God will avoid all extremes, or it might be back in my favorite Ecclesiastes. Either way, I think there's lots of times I find people going to the super extreme well, I say people, normally me, going to ridiculous extreme interpretation. So when you hear don't wear jewelry, immediately you think, okay, then I must always only wear and buy the absolute cheapest things at all times. But this is actually, I think, implying, that there is wisdom sometimes in having a bit more investment in the things that you own. Because I would assume, a bit like if you buy if you buy a car from a reputable brand, you expect it to last a long time. I would think it's the same way with these more expensive items that you own, that they're not only flashy, but also maybe are a sensible investment. But maybe I'm speculating a bit there. Yes, Skelly Priest is confirming it was made with bugs' eggs or something, so it was rare and expensive.
Yeah, so when it says fine linen and purple, it's not suggesting silk, which would be the absolute highest end.
Huh.
It doesn't say silk and jewelry, right? It says like linen and purple, which is extravagant, but not too extravagant, maybe.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. So it would be if we did a car analogy, it would be like he drives an Audi rather than he drives a Lamborghini.
Yeah. If we're translating this for men, you find a man who drives a sensible, reliable.
Sorry, I don't know what the women equivalent would be.
Find yourself a wife who wears purple. That's what he's saying.
Red. That's not a combo, though, is it? Purple doesn't go with scarlet.
I guess not.
Her householder in scarlet and she's in purple. That's the look.
You know you found the one.
Okay, Southwest Sound thinks Volvo. Are you claiming Volvo is like
I think
the most Christian car make? Okay, so now here's an interesting one. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So why are we now talking about the husband? Does Mr. Poe spend a lot of time with the elders of the land?
Elders of the land. Yeah, I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know what the historical context is, but the only way I could justify this verse being here is that the wife is in charge of keeping all of the other men's wives happy, and to promote the sort of social aspect of the couple's life. And so if she's going around saying nice things about her husband and making her husband look good by wearing purple and red, then he will be respected. Even if they've never met him, they'll go like, wow, that woman, she must have a really great husband.
You think the elders were more like, here comes John in his ridiculous red, like entirely dressed head to toe in red. This is like Father Christmas has turned up at the gates.
That's what it means about being ready for winter. He's got a Father Christmas costume.
I'm not sure that's exactly how I read it. I think this is about the husband being of high status, known in a positive way at the gate. Like the gate being a significant place in a city where, by the sounds of it, the elders would meet and discuss things. Presumably the gates were a big deal because I assume you needed to have lots of people there to guard them and lots of fancy. Maybe it was also where people came through, so you'd be greeting people there. So lots of significance about the gate. And then the elders of the land being the wise, authoritative people who are in charge, who are making decisions and deciding probably court cases and things. So to sit amongst the elders was also a mark of respect. So then if this is advice just for the husband to find a woman, is this not a bit recursive? Like, surely if this is just about finding your perfect wife,
that's why I say I can't make sense of it. So I'm open to suggestions.
Any thoughts, Christine or Faith? Like, why talk about the husband here?
My first thought was the type of man the husband is speaks to the character of the wife. So maybe respectable husband equals respectable wife.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
Yeah. I think that's totally right. Any other thoughts, Faith?
Well, if it's advice for him to choose a wife, this might be something to look forward to for him. If he actually chooses a good wife, he might get there.
She hasn't brought him into disrepute. So yes, if he was, maybe he was he was amongst the elders all the time in his single days, gets married to this unwise woman, and now he's cast out. They're all there in red, and he shows up in brown or whatever. Like, come on. Well, no, yeah, I think all of these ideas are probably I hesitate with these sorts of proverbs to be declaring this is the correct interpretation, because they're sort of stand by themselves, and the interpretations. I feel like when we're reading through, we're more like meditating on it, trying to pull strands of meaning out from it rather than rewording it into better words, as it were. But yeah. I think all of those ideas are kind of correct. This is what you can look forwards to as the husband if you marry this woman. But it's also, I think, reasonable to say that is what a woman would look for if she's this kind of woman that we should admire. She's not going to be chasing a low-life deadbeat. She wants to find somebody who's respected and is considered wise enough to be amongst the elders and is known at the gates, somebody who contributes enough to the community to
no, that's a good point. It is, I think women's status is so much dictated by their husband that it's almost hard to explain how great this woman is without saying, well, obviously her husband is great as well, otherwise what are you doing with him?
I've heard it said that as a vast generalization, but if men are attracted more so to signs of fertility, women are attracted to status. This is the kind of Evo Psych line, isn't it?
In the like headline subtitle.
Yeah, to boil it down to ridiculously small thoughts.
But I think it's probably true, yeah.
But then it's also notable that like there's only so many men who fit this description. and she's managed to land one of them, right? She's her one of her qualifications for being this admirable woman is that she's impressed a man. And I also think the same would be true in reverse, that a man who has this wife, that's one of the key reasons people might admire and look up to him, because she's seen something in him that's worthy of getting married. Do you see what I mean? Like when two excellent people get married, that marriage reflects well on both of them. Not only do they seem to be good individually, but they've both thoroughly examined one another and said, yeah, we're a match.
Yeah, to put it another way, I think if you can recognize potential in someone, you can get a really good match. It's like investing in a stock before it starts to go up. If you can see potential in a man who doesn't have a very high status, you got a good chance of grabbing him. And then if you help him to work on himself and become a really good man, you've got yourself a bargain, so to speak. and if you have a good marriage, then the two people will help to build each other up. So even if he wasn't well respected when they got married, he definitely will be if he has a good wife who's helping him, supporting him properly.
It is interesting how all the way through what we've seen, there's these short-term choices like working hard and being trustworthy that lead to gain. We see this a lot in Proverbs. There's a pattern. Again, it's not saying that everybody who's poor deserves it, but it is saying we see across the span of human history, across the, in general terms, it is true to say that you expect good things to happen in your life if you exhibit excellent qualities. So yeah, and this picture is of a man and a woman who are married and are making a great image together. I guess an image of God, if we link it back to the beginning of Genesis. Okay, where are we up to? I think we already did this, didn't we? Did we? Okay. I think she makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. We've talked about strength being her clothing, and Poe, you mentioned you mentioned not dignity. You said something else. Maybe dignity is the same thing. Modesty, I think you said. Is dignity and modesty the same thing? Not quite.
Some people would say so. It can mean the same thing if that's what your value system is.
Yeah. But she's not just making clothing for her own house. She's got such a quantity and quality that she's able to sell them. She's able to deliver them to the merchant. They're great. They're other people want what she's producing. And we, Faith, you mentioned this verse. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. Oh, we didn't do that verse yet. But yes, she. It doesn't say which non-biblical sort of Victorian wisdom sometimes says a woman remains quiet and lets the men do all of the teaching and all of the wisdom.
I think it's interesting. This whole passage is everything is phrased in a positive and not in a negative. Like, don't do this. This is what a bad woman does. It's all when it's phrased in a way to build up good women and say she speaks with wisdom, which is kind of implies that she doesn't speak inane things. She doesn't say silly things. It's almost like she only speaks with wisdom.
Right.
But it's phrased in such a way that you can't possibly take offense to it. It's something to aspire to that's not actually putting you down.
Interestingly, it also says she opens her mouth with wisdom. Doesn't actually say she speaks wisdom. And I hesitate to read too much into it, not having read the actual Hebrew. But I think the way it's been translated, and I trust the ESV quite a lot. So I think the implication is actually she is using wisdom to decide when to open her mouth.
I see.
Perhaps,
so it's not,
as perhaps Christine is doing.
Yeah, so because she opens her mouth and wisdom comes out, but actually you're saying that, to say someone opened the door with trepidation, you'd say that this is the description of how they're opening the door. So,
right.
I like
she speaks when it is wise to speak. Someone's done. Yeah, and actually, I'd say that's something I could also learn. Is sometimes the best thing to do is to say nothing, or to wait for the right moment to speak, especially if you don't quite know all the details. And this
hard to make small talk that way, though, I find.
Well, maybe small talk is a practice that brings with it bad habits.
Maybe. If I meet someone, I go hello, and then I'll just speak wisdom, and they will be so impressed that they will be friends with me.
Well, I'll tell you what's on my mind at the moment. Do you remember 2 weeks ago when I started streaming on Waiting for UO when they were talking about the roast dinners on the other channel, and I was there with absolutely nothing to talk about, and I just blabbered for like an hour. Yeah. So I clearly have the ability to talk at great length about nothing, but I also think if you speak a lot, you devalue each individual utterance. Maybe we should all aspire. I know this is specifically for women, this kind of image, but maybe we should all aspire to hold back, not say every thought that comes into our heads. But that's certainly not going to encourage poor Faith and Christine, who are not used to streaming. Now we're reading passages about like don't speak unless you're really sure. They're already having enough trouble, I'm sure.
Just read the Bible and don't say
I'm never gonna talk.
All right, let's carry on. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. I find it funny this is one sentence. This is like two disconnected thoughts to me.
I felt like I've eaten the bread of idleness a few times. You know, when you go to the fridge and you're not really hungry.
Yeah, I think that's a very literal interpretation. I suspect it's just meaning don't be idle.
Yeah.
But it's a nice poetic way to put it, isn't it?
I don't know if they had an equivalent of going to the bread bowl when
this
you're
would
not
be
hungry.
Yeah, probably. This would be
So you glitched out a little bit there. I don't know if that was just me.
Oh, yeah, it was probably me. I was just saying you could possibly put a semicolon in the middle here. Whoa, this light's just decided to go bright. I wonder if given that they're in the same sentence, perhaps the way to connect these two is to say the way that she looks well to the ways of her household is by not being idle. Or in other words, her household won't be properly looked after if she is idle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could definitely relate.
You mean you've seen things spin out of control by lack of action?
Well, there's always something to do is the thing in the house. Like it can always be cleaner. It's like that. It's like painting that bridge. It was the Golden Gate Bridge, where by the time you got to one end, the other end needs painting again. And if you live in a house of any kind of size, that's kind of what it's like to take care of it. I find. So then
does idleness just mean any time that you take a break?
Well, it's like if you need a break.
Christine or Faith, what do you think about that?
Most probably not. I'd say the needy might also be people who need listening ear or something. So maybe she just takes a break to listen to people and has time for them too. I don't think taking a break is bad per se.
Yeah, I'd agree. Like I think that there is maybe idleness is rest taken to an extreme. Like you've got 6 days of work and 1 day of rest in creation and in perhaps the pattern that we should follow through our lives. So to never rest is an error, but also to take too much rest, I think, is idleness, and that would be to rest for well, I don't think it's as simple as a mathematical formula of one in 7, but you know.
But on that subject, the first one of the times I encountered Proverbs 31 is on a day of rest. I think religious Jewish people sing that song. The men sing this song to their wives at Shabbat dinner. So after she's been busy and prepared everything, and when they rest, he will sing that to her, kind of as a way to honor her, I think. And so, cool. I guess rest is good.
Yeah, that's great. I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. I think it's lovely. Like, who wouldn't want to have your children and your husband, you know, singing your praises? And also, I like that it's many women have done excellently, which is kind of a nice balance to the verses that we were talking about at the beginning of the stream, don't you think? That I found one upright man in 1,000, not one woman, or the there's very clear recognition here that actually many women have done excellently. And even the husband, speaking to his wife, is not afraid to acknowledge that. So she's not going to be jealous of him complimenting other women, but he's clear that he's just got eyes for her. And I think it is the case that words of affirmation are probably very important in a marriage.
Yeah, I frequent some forums for women and mothers, and it is shocking to see. I say shocking, but I mean it's not uncommon to see women who don't feel appreciated by their husbands, and by their account they're doing everything right and they're doing lots of work, and they don't feel appreciated at all. And it's a real shame. Where I really don't know what advice you can give, to a woman who feels like she is doing all she can, not appreciated. When in a just world, you'd say, "Well, try harder." Unfortunately, you have to do more work, and then maybe he'll notice. When maybe that's not always the case. And what else can you do? I mean, in the biblical sense. It's interesting. It's not a very modern way of seeing marriage, where you say, well, maybe you should sit down and have a conversation about it.
You don't think that having a conversation about it is a modern way to look at it?
No, I think that is the modern way of looking at it.
Right.
Well, not that this is all about what a good marriage is. I know we didn't quite get to the end yet, but it's a wonderful vision of a good marriage, and it's not easy, but it seems like it's worth having, and it's worth the work to get it. And yet, I was just contemplating that it's a shame that some people, women and men, I expect, feel like they're doing everything right, and they don't end up with a happy marriage.
Yeah, well, I was just wondering if we compare it to the earlier thing about the husband being known at the gates and sitting among the elders. Perhaps again, it's a sign of the woman's wisdom in choosing a man who will appreciate her. I guess that's also feels like a nice balance to me, because there's errors on both sides here. Women will, I think it's as again a general statement. I don't know why I feel the need to caveat it when Proverbs is full of uncaveated generalizations, but like I think it's often a driving attractive force for women to want a man who is go-getting, powerful, popular, rebellious kind of individual. Maybe less so to, often, that is such a strong attractive force that you could end up with somebody who hasn't got any more gentle, caring aspects to his personality. And that's kind of tragic, to end up in a situation where, like, oh, this guy was super attractive, but actually was horrible as an individual and doesn't appreciate you. I think this would be an obvious flip side of a man who chooses a woman who's maybe, supermodel looks, but absolutely no moral character whatsoever, or uninteresting or whatever. Like, far better to, and there's verses about maybe we should look some of these up as well, but I will. Anyone know the one about the dripping tap?
You heard the one about the dripping tap?
You heard the one?
No, I don't know the dripping tap one.
Proverbs 27. This is a fun one.
I think I might have to shoot off because I have
yes,
wifely duties. So I don't know if you want to read the last two of these verses, and then maybe the rest of you can
sure,
stay on and have a chat about something else.
You're missing out though on the.
I will listen.
Dripping tap.
I will listen to the dripping tap, but I have to go do some chores.
Feel free to drop out now if you want, but otherwise I want
to hear the last two.
Get to the end. Yeah. Charm is deceptive and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Again, reference to the gates, and in this case, it's the woman who's being praised as her works. And I also think this mention of charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, especially because charming women, right back at the very beginning of Proverbs, are being warned against. And of course, beauty, so often men chase after beauty, but it's said here to be vain. So I guess, Poe, before you drop out, any last thoughts about those verses or the whole chapter?
I think it's quite nice, and it kind of ties back to what I was saying about unappreciative husbands, is that they're saying that they do need some encouragement, and if you give them thanks, and if you talk well of them to other people, they'll be happy about that, and other people will think you have a great wife. Yeah, all good stuff.
Great, thank you for joining, Poe.
Thanks.
I'll let you go.
I'll continue listening. But,
okay,
good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Right. Before, I think we should go and look at that other verse about the dripping tap, because I just can't resist. But I do notice there seems to be a war going on in the comment section. Think Fungus is fighting with everybody else. So I don't think it's quite on topic for the stream, but I just wanted to note. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. So simmer down is my message to the chat. British Berean has. Oh, okay. So there's two. Yes, let's look them both up. So this from this one. British Berean says Proverbs 19 verse 3 says, "When a man's folly brings his way to ruin, his heart rages against the Lord." That's not it. 13. I thought you'd led me astray, British Berean. I trusted you. Here we are. "A foolish son is ruin to his father, and a wife's quarrelling is a continual dripping of rain. Any thoughts about this little double proverb here?
Well,
I think
find the comparison. Sorry, I find the comparison a bit strange. Well, personally, I like the sound of dripping rain.
I wonder if it's meant to be more like Chinese water torture, like it's dripping on your face and you can't stop it. I think your interpretation is quite fun, though. It's like, what you're after is a quarreling wife. Just the nice, gentle sound of quarreling going along in the background. It's like the discussion of, I don't know if you've heard of this one, the burning coals on the head. What is it? Jesus says, I think it's if somebody slaps one cheek, turn the other to him also. It's that same passage, and he says, in doing so, you will heap burning coals on their head. And I think I'd need somebody with more knowledge to check me on this, but that's actually meant to be a positive. Like we imagine the burning coals falling on the head as like some epic like magical curse, like you cast burning coals and bury the guy in a big pile. But I think it was more like they used to carry bowls of coals over their heads. It was like a good thing. So it's kind of saying, do good to your enemies. So in this case, a continual dripping of rain, Christine, is surprising to you because you'd interpret that as a negative. No, you'd think a dripping of rain is a good thing, like one of those apps that you put on to help you sleep, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Well, maybe someone should come out with a more biblically accurate one where you can put on the sound of a quarreling wife as you go off to sleep.
Sure.
So do we think this is a fair comparison? A foolish son and a quarreling wife being kind of paralleled here. Perhaps sons being foolish is quite a common thing, and wives quarreling is quite a common thing to watch out for. But unlike your wife, you don't really have much choice about your son, do you? But I suppose you bring him up, so perhaps that's it. You can, don't choose a quarreling wife, and don't bring your son up in a way that makes him foolish, because he will bring ruin to you. Interesting. Brishburn had the same idea for the app. Okay, and what was the other one? 27:15. Continual dripping on a rainy day and a quarrelsome wife are alike. Okay, so this is like this is just a remake. This is like a repurposing of the same concept. But, a continual dripping. I think most people would find that annoying. Like if you, I get that in the right context it can be cozy to have a drumming of rain on a window or something, but if you're trying to concentrate and you're just having bloop, bloop, bloop,
Okay.
that's more the dripping that I have in mind, maybe. But I think the key interesting thing to me for this verse, I remember hearing a sermon, may even have been from the infamous Mark Driscoll. I'm not sure. No, it's probably Ben Stewart, actually. Talking about the fact these are clearly verses about, I think it was a fair point. These are verses that are intended to be heard by people who were unmarried, who were evaluating. And this was kind of in the context of what is dating. Is there a biblical picture of what it looks like to be in a kind of courtship or dating relationship? And that it must be that you're intended to evaluate, as one example, whether your wife is going to be quarrelsome, and if so, consider whether you want the continual dripping for the rest of your life. But I think, in a way, this one verse is then opened up and elaborated for the whole of chapter 31, right?
Well, and now if you want it, you can also soon just buy the app, and it's going to be okay.
That's true. No need to have a wife. If you want quarreling in your life, there'll be Quarrel AI very soon available. We kind of skipped on after Poe left, but did you have anything to say about these two? Charm is deceptive and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruits of her hand and let her work praise her in the gates.
Well, I'd say now we see how she got the money in the first place. She gets the fruit of her hands. And also, as a woman, I don't know if that's common, but we tend to listen to what people say about us a lot and care about it. And I think these last few verses kind of show who we should care about, who talks well about us. And maybe not listen to the other voices, but the husbands and the kids and the wise men at the gate. Those are the people who matter.
Yeah, the elders of the land, as we found earlier, were at the gates.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting point. Whose voices do we listen to? I mean, we have so many ways of having input in our lives, don't we, these days? People can comment about us on social media, or you hear secondhand comments from people. I don't know, like, is the negative or the positive worse in some ways? Like, you can hear somebody say positive things about you and it kind of puffs you up, but maybe not, going after that sort of praise maybe isn't the best use of time. If you're wanting anybody to praise you, if you're going after the praise of your children and your husband, you're probably also doing good, positive things for their benefit, and then enjoying the fact that they're pleased with you. I tend to think anytime we've got a sinful desire, like the feeling of being praised is good, and then you can get addicted to it, that's bad. But it always has a rightful, godly root. Do you know what I mean? Like, the correct reason that God's given us this desire to be praised is because, like you say, maybe we should be looking to be praised by husbands and by children and by the people at the gates. Christine, any last thoughts?
I think for me, verse 30 is probably quite a comfort. I don't know if it's just for my generation or something, but there is this obsession to always look good or to appear good, and to be reminded that that doesn't matter is nice to hear.
Yeah, interesting that, I mean, in terms of looking good and being good, the only actual mention of beauty is here in verse 30 as a warning. Like, men shouldn't be seeking beauty as the top requirement. And I guess I joked a couple of times during the stream about the fact that men tend to evaluate women visually. And I think that is very clearly being warned against here. Like, charming and beautiful women might be immediately alluring, but and go back and read the first 3 chapters of Proverbs to really discover the true dangers of that. But it's probably, I guess it's also a danger for women to chase after that ideal too, because it's probably a way to be powerful. And if you can be charming and beautiful, you have a lot of attention and positive feedback and but that's not what women who go down this path rather than the rest of the chapter I think it's a very small world to live in, and also the husband, that you maybe end up with if you go down that route, doesn't praise you, doesn't end up sitting among the elders. I think these are the things that are more praiseworthy, honourable ends to shoot towards, but still exciting, hopefully.
Well said.
Thank you. Faith, any last thoughts on the whole chapter? Ashton Duke says natural beauty is paramount. What do we think about that claim? I don't know exactly what Ashton means. Do you think there's a sense in which, because I've wondered about this. This is pure speculation here, so I'm just interested in your thoughts. But perhaps there is an attractive quality to good people. Not maybe, so perhaps some people are born more and less genetically gifted. So I don't think we can say natural beauty is paramount in that, somebody who looked good without makeup on because they were born very symmetrical. I don't think that's a godly thing to care about. But there's an attitude, a posture, a way of speaking, a way of reacting to things that is bred of a lifetime of caring about godly things and chasing godliness. That I think is wholesome and attractive in a positive way, and maybe that's a way I would agree with. The natural beauty is paramount. What do you think about that?
I'd agree. When I read Proverbs 31, I thought of my mentor that I used to have. She was a mother of 5. All her kids are grown up, and lots of those qualities appeared in her. And she's a woman you just like to spend time with. She's not a beauty queen, and she's worked a whole lot during her lifetime. She was a farmer's wife, so she had strong arms, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, you felt welcome at her place every time. So that's a kind of beauty that lasts, I guess.
Yeah, I just think there's kind of, if you think of the gifts of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, I can't help thinking that spending time around somebody like that, they would be physically more beautiful. To take, maybe it's more obvious to take the opposite. Somebody who is sulking and frowning and snarling and angry and upset and jealous, and all of these expressions are ugly on your face. And to take the speculation to the nth degree, I also think if you pull those expressions a lot, they end up sitting, they come to you more naturally, then maybe they appear in your face even at rest. But maybe that's a stage too far. So that final speculation aside, I do think there's a case to be made for being able to detect somebody's character from being with them, and that might be a feeling that you're looking at somebody beautiful, but it's actually to do with the way they behave. And Southwest Sam says, I prefer the word grace rather than beauty. Yeah, a graceful, and grace is an interesting one. And I suppose grace at root is a quality of somebody who's experienced God's favor, even though they didn't deserve it. Great. And in English, we think of graceful more reductionistically, don't we? Like a graceful swan, maybe in landing, they swoop in and they're not clumsy. I think there's there's a much richer idea of grace that is connected up with God's gifts. Think Fungus agrees. You see people's energy, especially when they let it flow. And then Stephen Bond says, imagine what it would be like to be the husband of a wife who's so focused on her appearance that she has surgery, makes herself up constantly, etc. That's interesting. I think that is very interesting. To me, a woman who, like a Hollywood celebrity who, as she ages, feels the need to continually modify her appearance so it becomes unnatural, there's a feeling that person is not sitting comfortably in their skin, that they're basically unhappy with aging and approaching death, whereas a Christian attitude would be, I'm coming towards Christ. I'm as I'm aging. And isn't, I mean, there's definitely a proverb earlier that says, a young man's glory is in his strength, but an old man's or an old person's glory is in their grey hair. And there's no, the grey hair is like a crown of splendor on their head. We need, as a culture, I think, to relearn the beauty of the aged and the kind of the respect we should have towards people, like genuine respect for wisdom in the people who have taken the time to think things through and live life well. There's an attractive quality to that. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's any by the way, any thoughts on what I was just monologuing on? Agree?
Agreed.
Yes, sure.
And I guess beauty has its place in Proverbs 31 too, but it's the woman makes things around her beautiful. But maybe her beauty takes a step back, but the whole purple scarlet things, it seems like she's taking care of her surroundings.
Yeah, and
beauty enters in it, in a marriage.
Yeah, I don't want to push it too far. Like, we're not saying the husband's appreciation of the beauty of his wife doesn't exist. Clearly, if you read Song of Songs, the physical appearance of his wife is like stunning to him, and I think it would be wrong for two people to get married actually if there wasn't fundamentally a physical attraction on both sides. It's just not what this chapter is putting front and center. And I actually also think God will make a husband and wife attractive to each other in sorry, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it. There's kind of a perception.
I think I know what you're getting at. I've heard stories that way. My cousin was best friends with her now husband for a long time, and they kind of weren't attracted to each other for a while. But then they prayed for quite a while, and now they're married and have 4 kids. So
they're praying together, like,
it's obvious.
God, please help me to ignore how incredibly ugly.
No, not like that. They're not ugly, so it's okay.
They're just very fussy. The number one this from Indy. The number one technique my wife and I tell people to use to find a spouse is to volunteer. You step outside yourself and focus on helping others, and authentic beauty will shine through. That's, I think, excellent advice. Apart from anything else, how are you supposed to get to know somebody until you see them in a richer context? Like, I think maybe this is a topic for this is a topic for another stream. But I will say I have in the past tried dating apps and found them very difficult to engage with, because I mean, how are you supposed to get to know somebody who's just like, it's just like a picture in a paragraph? So I kind of think the whole concept of this modern approach to where you can basically, I think lots of I should put it, the reason I'm hesitating is that I know lots of people who have met and got married through dating sites, and like, it's perfectly wonderful, godly marriage, nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying it's bad, but I do think they were invented and flourished primarily in a kind of hookup culture situation, and that a lot of the mechanics of how they work, it just isn't ideal for people searching for something more than, you know, something frivolous. Like how would you evaluate somebody on a dating app, whether they were trustworthy, whether, I mean, I suppose you could say, you know, that's the trick. Okay, for women listening to this wanting to set up dating profiles, right? So, interests: wool and flax, sewing, constantly buying fields. You could use one of those photo editing apps to make your arms look absolutely colossal, like trees. Obviously, you know, you buy something in purple. All right. Any last comments? And then we'll probably get out of here. A lot of grey-haired people still act and think like teenagers. Yes, agreed. There's a very different thing between wisdom and age. Indy says no apps. Love you guys. No apps. You know what, Indy? You're very black and white. I think I do know people who've had successful marriages that have spawned from apps. I just think it's hard work. You know, you're fighting the system rather than it helping. I don't think this is a technology. Yeah, Daniel says dating apps are soul destroying. I knew a girl with a lazy eye and it became cute to me over time. Attraction is very malleable. Yeah, I can relate to that. And I can also think of people who, even as a friend, there's people who I've known who the first time you meet them, there's something physical about them that's a bit affronting. But then if you like them as a person, any aspect of them becomes quite endearing and an individual. Okay, fairly long comment from Southwest Sam, but maybe this will be the last comment we do. 100% Lambda, but I don't feel as if people on a dating app are really on there for something frivolous. They understand the scene and will use the apps to move to a more mature relationship. I'm trying to break the system with trad quotes / Bible verses. Not overly successful, but not an outright failure. Okay, yeah, so there you go. A nuanced take on dating apps from Southwest Sam. Great. Okay, well, maybe as a last comment then on Proverbs 31. I think this is a beautiful text that shows that women are different from men and in wonderful ways, and that there are, I mean, as you were saying, Christine, right? Maybe intimidating to try to live up to this, but it's a glorious thing to aspire to. And okay, so maybe we'll have to return to some of the other verses that we mentioned about biblical womanhood another time. But unless either of you has any last comments, that probably wraps up today. Do either of you have anything to plug? As far as I know, you don't have YouTube channels. So.
Well, sorry, just to return back to.
Oh yes, please.
I don't know if I read this somewhere, but I was thinking again, also regarding my comment about how it's intimidating. Maybe I'm thinking about this all too like superficially, like it's some to-do list. I think what this person mentioned, they were saying something like, this is how God already sees us women, and he manifests within us all these traits. So I don't know, it's still a struggle for me.
Well, we know that once saved, we expect a process of sanctification, right? Like I quite like that take, that if you're a Christian and you're a woman, you can look at this as like your awesome destination that you're moving towards. And it's framed as an excellent wife who can find, but it's also framed as much more precious than jewels. I think this is both meant, as you say, as a challenge, but also as a real commendation. And I know I started off by saying, oh, well, do you think there's any women who've actually lived up to this? I think this is the distillation of the amazing qualities of womanhood that, you know, I've seen many women who do bear, you know, significant portion of these kind of qualities. Now, how many are they compared to the broad sweep of the population? Maybe not so many, but worth seeking out. Cool. Oh, hang on, we've got a super chat from LaRue. Can me and Elphys do a stream about the millennium? You know, you don't have to super chat to communicate with me, LaRue. But yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to do a stream on different views of eschatology in general. So yes, maybe this becomes a particular stream with you guys, and then I could, because I guess you guys probably have a particular view about the millennium. It would be interesting to hear a variety of views. I'm not entirely sure my own position on it. Which millennium? He's referring to, there's 1,000 years referred to in Revelation. And it's not entirely clear whether that should be taken allegorically or as something that happens before Christ returns or as something that happens after Christ returns, which is pre, post, and amil eschatology. Thanks very much, Faith and Christine, for joining me. For first-time streamers, I think you did exceptionally well. So I hope to have you back. And thank you to Poe, who's already left and is not a first-time streamer, but she did very well as well. Good night, everybody. And I've clicked end broadcast, which I'm never entirely sure if that means the broadcast has actually ended.